also with the changing of education, with all the test scores, and the teachers and I always joke about how our plate is so full, and we just keep piling things on, and we're like, whoa, when are we going to drop off? And one of these is going to fall off eventually, but the teachers at our school, phenomenal. We're just like jugglers, we're like, no, it's going to fall off. We just keep throwing it back up there, and that's what we've been doing for literally the last 20, 40 years, and I think that's really been a huge success for us. But we do have a lot of critical issues as well. Middle school, high school is also a big thing, and I know right now the Japanese immersion program is working and looking at the middle school and high school and really trying to make sure that our students at that level, because we have students now that are out of college, and one of them is here, and I was like, wow, I taught her, I was like, that's kind of scary. I close on the it's when they come out, you're like, well, you want something good for them in the middle school and high school. We don't want that immersion program to end at the end of 5th grade when they graduate. And so it's really looking at how do we continue that and help those students. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm going to try to focus on secondary since that's my area. I moved to California back in '96. I interviewed in several different districts, but the district that I settled on was Long Beach because at the time that I interviewed, they were looking for a Spanish language arts teacher, but it wasn't called that at the time, for a secondary program that they had just begun. So I was in the perfect place, the right place at the right time, as they say. And I've been there since. This is my 15th year teaching Spanish language arts, 6th, 7th, 8th grade. And I know it says on the program here, success is challenged and critical issues, so I'll kind of go in reverse. And I think one of the critical issues for us is, exactly as the research was saying, is that it continues to grow. These programs are growing, and in fact, I was just sharing and reading LA Times on Monday, an article speaking directly to that. And I think, especially for California, and this is one of the things that I've always said, we need to be careful and not forget what happened with 227 and what happened at that time, that we have many bilingual programs at the time that all carry the same label. And when the law came around, it swept good bilingual programs under the rug along with those that weren't implemented correctly. So as our programs are continuing to grow, we need to make sure that they grow in a way that they are implemented correctly. And if they are going to vary from a model, that we try to find a way to get them to say what model they're implementing. Because as we know, when they're implemented correctly, we do get the right results. But we need to make sure that as they continue to grow, that they're implemented the way it's prescribed. I think that's one of the critical issues. The other one, of course, for secondary is staffing. I always talk about that you have the 3 strikes going in secondary. Number 1 is that you have to be single subject credentialed. So you have to find somebody who's single subject credentialed in the classes you're going to teach in the target language. Second would be that you have somebody who has that credential and who is bilingually proficient to the level where they can teach that subject in the target language. And then for us, for me in particular, the 3rd strike is that you have somebody who has those first 2 qualifications and wants to teach at the middle school level. Of course, they're always going to want to go to high school, but those are the 3 strikes that we have. So the staff, finding the qualified staff. The other one is the parents. I think we really need to understand that parents initially, excuse me, in a dual language program, they come with different ideas of why they want to enroll their child in this kind of a program. I think for our fluent English-speaking populations, a lot of the times we see the monetary benefits of being able to participate in the world economy when they have this kind of a background education. Where for many of our heritage speakers, they really want to make sure that they maintain the language that allows them to maintain the family bonds, that the son can still speak with the grandparents, and that they're able to keep that family continuity going on. So it's really 2 different populations that come together for different reasons. But it's kind of a symbiotic relationship because, as we know, many times your more fluent families are the ones that are going to push these programs to continue to be developed, to get the resources they need. And really, it's both populations that end up benefiting as a result of this. And lastly, of course, you're looking at the students themselves. For secondary, the issue we always have is, my kid's been in it since kindergarten. They already had it for 6 years. Do they really need to continue through secondary? So it's always explaining the benefits. To really reap the benefits, and of course studies talk about that gap between 5, 4, 7 years, to really reap the benefits of bilingualism. And it really comes to fruition in these middle school years, which we have witnessed in the past years. Another thing that's a challenge is getting parents to understand that you're not developing language at the expense of academics. And early on, that was one of the things that we really had to demonstrate, is that our students are academic academically performing well. And again, in those 4 through 7 years is where they really catch up to their EO peers, their English-only speaking peers, and academically, and not only catch up to them, but surpass them. And then, of course, you have issues related to English language learners, which is huge here in California. We have 1.5 million English language learners that we also are able to demonstrate that these programs are closing the achievement gap. So along those lines, I guess I can transition to, well, what have been the successes along those lines? Some of the successes we've had is that, first of all, speaking to English language learners, just this year, I always go back and look at our numbers to see where we are, and I did years ago, we had the SAT-9 still placed, remember that. I did a 5-year longitudinal study of 4 different immersion classes because I wanted to see is it something that's particular to the program and not just to that class. And I tracked them across, like I said, for 5 years. I looked at their SAT-9 scores in language, reading, and math, and I also looked at their apprentice scores, which is what they were taking at the time, in those same 3 areas. And I tried to factor in everything, SES is an indicator of their, free reduced lunch is an indicator of the low SES. And by the way, we're at like 80% right now. And I looked at all these factors to try to really get an idea of what exactly our students, how are they performing. I also looked at how many of our students were being redesignated. And the one thing I can say is in our lowest percentage of redesignation, we were on par with the state, county, district, and the rest of our school. And that was in our lowest. This last year, right now, with my current 8th graders, 83% of those who began in 1st grade as English language learners, 83% of them have, before the end of 8th grade, been reclassified as fluent English proficient students. In 7th grade, we're already at 80%. So I'm looking at my next year, we're going to be well over 90%. And really what this brings to light is another group that's another trend within a critical issue, which is our long-term English language learners. I'm looking at my 8th graders, and there's 4 that really fall within that umbrella of they haven't reached proficiency because, not of language, but because of literacy. And that's the other thing that I think is a critical issue to look at is not just how they're performing in English, but how are they performing in Spanish. Because if you only look at their English scores, on paper they look the same. And what we used to do, what came through the study that I did years ago, was I was looking at students, and if I only looked at the English, they looked the same in the fact that they were both scoring low in English. But when I looked at their Spanish scores, it gave me a different picture. I could see some students who were very high literate in Spanish, low literacy in English, and that was the students that I was terming unbalanced bilinguals. Very high in their first language, very low in their second language. And really for that student, what they needed was more language development. And then they would be able to demonstrate their literacy abilities in the second language. So that was the key to solving, per se, the needs of that child. Whereas there were other students who were high-functioning bilinguals. In other words, they're very high in Spanish, very high in English, which is great, which is what we want for all our students. But that also brought to light the issue of the students who were low literacy in both languages. And for that student, just putting them in English language development classes and giving them more language was not going to address the needs of that student. It was literacy that needed to be developed with that student. And that's really been the key of what we're doing lately. In fact, I have a slide I projected for you here, but to try to explain it in a nutshell, when I did the study, what I noticed was we had your fluent English proficient students always outscoring your EO populations. And really that brought to mind why. Why is it that they continue to, of course, the obvious reason would be they reap the benefits of bilingualism. They're able to function at a much higher level. But what about those EO students who've been reported just as long? Why shouldn't they? And really it was because I was only looking at 3 populations. Your English language learner, who's separated from those who've been fluent English proficient, and then your EO population. When really, the way we're looking at it now is within the EO population, splitting them into 2 groups, just like we do with our heritage speakers, of Spanish language learners and fluent bilingual proficient students. So really, I've gotten away from turning even my heritage speakers as fluent English proficient to fluent bilingual proficient. Because that's really the goal for all our students, fluent bilingual proficient. And what that allows us to do is to look within each of the 2 other language groups to really identify, are they an English language learner who is unbalanced bilingual, meaning they're going to need one language to become fluent bilingual proficient, or are they an unbalanced or low literacy balanced bilingual, which means we're going to have to really work on the literacy